Cool. And as I always say, we should be live now. So today's topic is going to be just sort of general recent reads and an open kind of discussion between the kind of three of us. I don't really have a bigger plan than that. Just wanted to kind of get together again and have a bit of a chat. So yeah, I haven't really set out a schedule. I haven't set up prompts. There's no agenda. Maybe that's playing dangerous. I don't know.
Well, let's see. I was gonna say we already covered time dilation and snow and anxiety and extroverts and introverts all behind the scenes. So we're warmed up and ready to go.
We should have been rolling with all that gold that we were discussing up ahead. But Highland G, I was just going to say, we've been so good lately. We've given ourselves themes. We've gotten we've done things like homework. I think it's okay for us to take a little bit of a relaxed attitude to one of these live streams. I think we've earned a little bit of a breather. Why don't you? Don't you think?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, just a fun Sunday conversation. I think that's the way to go about it.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, for those who may be watching now or watching later, we are on this larger live stream discussion on Strangers in Paradise, and we had that one marathon read of like about 1,000 pages, or like between 700 and 1,000 pages that we had a conversation on a month ago, and we've got the second part of that coming up. So it's not like we've been slacking off on our comics reading. We're still very much keeping on the homework treadmill, but this is a little bit of a break from that.
Yeah, let's put the plug in. So next Saturday, the 28th, we'll be back for part 2 of the Strangers in Paradise, where we'll be covering the kind of the middle section. We're going to do three sessions altogether, 3 streams altogether. We've done one. So if you're around next Saturday, the 28th of March, we'll be covering the second part, going kind of in depth, especially as we get into the meat of the story. And right on cue, Corvidel shows up in the comments, and he'll be joining us. Hopefully we'll have a couple, Damien, Sleepy Reader, and then hopefully one other guest as well with us. So expanding out the options this time.
Yes, and I think the last conversation was terrific, and glad to have Gore Vidal in the comments over here. It was a wonderful conversation, and if people haven't caught that yet, that's the last thing up on For the Love of Comics channel, and we'll be rotating this chat across various channels, so people who haven't watched it can catch up with that conversation over there.
Well, who's going to kick us off? Who's getting us going this morning?
All right, everyone jumped up at that. The enthusiasm on a Sunday afternoon was overwhelming. Highland G, why don't you get us started? We are here talking about recent reads, but because we've got these hundreds of pages of other stuff to read, pickings might be a little sparse this time around. Why don't you get us kicked off in style and make Matt and me feel bad about not having read that much?
Well, I've only really read a few things, and most of it's been like shorter trade paperbacks. To be honest, I've been kind of busy, and then I've got the Strangers in Paradise stuff to read. So yeah, not a huge amount of time. The most recent thing that I read, I'll maybe see if I can make myself a bit bigger for this. There we go. Most recent thing that I've read is this first volume of Batman and Robin, and it's by Joshua Williamson. It is the technically continuation of his standalone Robin run, but now they're back as Batman and Robin and kind of doing the whole duo thing again. But it's a bit of a sort of shock read in a way, like the way the characters and things are kind of acting in it. So like the main Robin run before was basically a sort of martial arts, sort of fighting tournament to the death type thing story. And it felt like Mortal Kombat basically.
Right. That's what I was going to say.
Like Damien had to go kind of out on his own, and he was taking on these various people in these various different tournaments and just kind of knocking out these bad guys and stuff. And then he literally gets given a coin which gets him into this secret tournament, which is on this island, which is called a Lazarus Island, and basically means that if you're killed on that island, you can die up to 3 times before you actually die. So they get to have this tournament to the death in several rounds. And Damien makes a whole bunch of friends that have similar skill sets, and you get to kind of get to know a little bit more about like his just other hobbies and personalities. He sits and reads manga at times and like stuff like that, and you get to see kind of more of his sort of like I guess like slice of life side of him, but also in this big action kind of focused and kind of environment. This feels like it kind of takes that sort of slice of life element of it, but almost to like a goofy level, and loses a little bit of focus on the missions and things like that. So like there'll be certain things happening with like the, you know, a certain enemy or whatever it is, and rather than focusing on like, oh yeah, we should really stop that enemy or figure out what that enemy's plan is, Bruce will be like, oh, I want to like get to know you better, so we're gonna like take you to school and we're gonna do whatever, like you know, like other like stuff with Damien as like father and son type stories. So like, it was just a bit of a shock to the system. I think like the first couple of issues, kind of reading it, I was like, this isn't the Damien that I've been reading for the last like 15 issues. This is like a very different take. You know, this is Damien the boy, the story, rather than Damien as Robin, the story, if you think of it kind of that way. But once you do take it on that way, it's actually quite a fun story overall, and it ends with a kind of camping trip that Batman's kind of not set up but knows ahead of time that there's sort of bad guys around, so that him and Damien are going to have to capture them. And so he's telling Damien that he's just taking him on this boring camping trip, but actually, you know, he's setting up a fun time for Damien outside of them wearing the Batman and Robin suits. So it's, you know, generally a heartfelt father-son story rather than like a Batman Robin story, which was really interesting take. But yeah, that's my most recent read.
Well, it's a father-son story in a camping trip then too, right? That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's something that I mean a lot of people in the US can relate to if they've had those experiences. How old is this?
Maybe a year or so. I don't know what it says on here.
Yeah, I was just curious when these issues. This sounds a lot like
23, 24 it says.
Oh wow. Right. Yeah, it's right. It's like right on the heels. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Just give me one second. It was right on the heels of this new, and I'll talk about it more later, but this DCKO initiative that they've got going on right now, which I don't care for, but it sounds like the exact same thing that they're doing now, line wide.
I was just going to ask, because I'm obviously, not as familiar. Are these like the regular main continuity comics, or are they like, spin-offs, Elseworlds, parallel lines? I know that both DC and Marvel have like something that's the main continuity. And that's where things. So is this part of that kind of storytelling? That's the main continuity at that time.
It is part of the main continuity, but it was taking place at the time that an event was kind of happening. And I don't know how much you know about the kind of background of Damien, but he's the grandson of like Ra's al Ghul, who is the sort of head of a assassin body, and he keeps himself alive by going in this sort of cocktail pit, which is called the Lazarus Pit, which kind of summons kind of demons within your soul, but also kind of keeps your body healthy. And the claim in this event story is that this island is the origin of these pits, and where he found this sort of material to be able to take and build his own pits wherever he wanted or needed them, kind of thing. So it does tie to other parts of Damien's family. I don't want to spoil the story for any viewers, but like there are ties to other members of Damien's family and why that island is the place that the tournament's going to take place on. But it is also clearly a rip-off from Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
Well, some would say that Mortal Kombat is a rip-off of Enter the Dragon. So,
interesting.
it's just, well, I mean, like, I'm certainly old enough to think about Enter the Dragon as being the prototype of that island tournament that people have to go to.
Speaking of Chuck Norris, who just passed away, he was one of the guys that shows up for that tournament and Enter the Dragon, right? Yeah, that was an influential film for me as a young kid, running around pretending I was a karate guy.
Or a Karate Kid.
Yeah, I try to avoid that. I don't want to have that Ralph Macchio come back on me.
Oh, no. I mean, I thought that the first season of that TV show, Cobra Kai, I thought the first season was perfect. It was like one of the most crowd-pleasing, fan service, but in the best way. Like that's how fan service should be done. I think the seasons after that went a little downhill, but that first season, like I had a grin on my face throughout. I guess I'm a bigger Karate Kid fan than you are, Matthew.
No, not at all. It's just I enjoyed the first, I think 2, maybe 3 seasons of it. Like you said, the first one was definitely the best, and then it just it became repetitive. Like you had to have somebody switch sides in order to create the drama, and it was like each season somebody was going to do that. It was just who was it?
But that was soapy.
Yeah,
and don't forget the big like dancing karate scenes that were always like choreographed perfectly.
So now you're hitting on my love and my love of Footloose when I grew up. The original Footloose with Kevin Bacon, and I mean just the Karate Kid, Enter the Dragon, Footloose. These are all instrumental movies in my childhood.
No, that's great. I don't know much about the continuity of stuff, but I think it's very interesting to me how much people keep mining. And that's why, when people say, oh, Batman's my favorite or Spider-Man's my favorite, like, it doesn't quite make sense to me because it's all about who's writing it and what are they doing with it. You can have so much different stuff. And it all comes down to runs. So would you say Highland G and Matthew Blackpool, would you say that Joshua Williamson is one of those writers who does good stuff with the superhero stuff? I ask as a complete, outsider. I know we've discussed a couple of times. I've found Tom King's writing to be pretty good. I found Mark Russell to be excellent. But I'm not that familiar. And sometimes when I've tried out some things that people have asked me to try out, they haven't necessarily affected me, but I have found people to be quite good. I think most recently Dennis Camp. I've tried out some Dennis Camp stories and they've been quite appealing. Martian Manhunter after 20th Century Men, Absolute Martian Manhunter. So again, I dabble, but when people tell me that the writing is good, would you consider Joshua Williamson one of those writers who I should seek out? And as a non-reader of continuity comics, would I be able to find my way into it, or is it really more for a select crowd?
So the interesting thing with him is actually that I got to know his works through his independent stuff. So like Nailbiter was the first thing that I picked up by him, which is a kind of comedy horror series. And like that was the first book that I kind of got into of his, and then he's gone on to do Birthright, which was a kind of like somewhat detective story, somewhat kind of like fantasy story. You cross between worlds and there's a whole kind of thing going on. And there's been a few other kind of books. So that was the first kind of like experience I kind of had of him. And then the next big thing was he took over The Flash. So he did The Flash for like, I don't know, 70 plus issues.
100 almost.
It's one of the longest runs of The Flash outside of like Jeff Johns. And what I really liked about it is it's maybe a little bit kind of controversial in a way, but like it's almost like a good retelling of kind of Barry's story, but for the current generations. So it takes a lot of the elements that were added into Wally's character over time, and powers and kind of things like that within the kind of Flash power set, and kind of establishes them more with Barry and with the Flash family as a kind of whole. And you do get some, like, not quite copy paste, but like villains that are maybe like, this is Barry's version of Wally's villain, or so on and so forth. But like, it's a really good run overall, and that's what kind of got me into his kind of stuff. Outside of that, with DC, he's actually mostly been I don't know how to kind of put it, like the kind of choreographer of what goes on within DC rather than the main writer. So a lot of things he's maybe wrote like the first 5 to 10 issues of, and then handed it over to another team, and then kind of sets up the next thing. So there's not a lot of books where I could say, like, read this and it's a long kind of thing you can get into, because you'd be moving on to another writing team fairly kind of quickly. The thing I liked with Robin is that, one, I like the sort of underdog side characters, because I don't know about anybody else, but my personal thing with like the main long kind of heroes is that they're not the good character. They're only as good as their rogues gallery or whatever kind of, event is going on at the time that they have to kind of deal with. After a while, they're, as a character, pretty much predictable. The outside elements that they're put into is what makes them interesting. Whereas for me, the side characters, the ones that don't have that flagship on them, the Nightwings, the Robins, that kind of thing, they have, as a writer, much more freedom to write things and personalities and hobbies and girlfriends and other things into those characters, because there's not so high stakes on changing them as there would be a Batman or a Spider-Man. So I enjoy those characters more. I think those characters are more interesting. And when Joshua took over Robin, I said one of the things that I really liked was that, rather than everybody else who wrote this kind of somewhat blank slate brat character as being Damien's whole personality, Joshua actually wrote a child into that, like hobbies, interests, feelings, like that come along with all those kind of things. And I think that's what he brings to the table a bit more to DC. He's a little bit like Jeff Lemire in that way, and some other writers where they maybe got young families themselves, and therefore that comes into their kind of writing. But I feel that he brings more personality to characters. It's probably the best way that I can kind of explain it. Whereas like some writers like writing a big action scene or a big epic kind of setup, but they don't really care about the character that they're writing. They're just writing the story. Whereas Joshua, for me, tends to write good characters, and that goes for his independent stuff and for what I've read of his DC, which is mostly, as I said, the Flash and Robin. And the Robin run goes into 2 volumes of this, and then unfortunately gets handed over to somebody else. So I don't know how good or bad it is after that.
And I'll put my 2 cents in, and just a nod out to Gore. Big Elizabeth Shue fan. I think I grew up with a crush on her and still have one on her as well. So yeah. I collected, I had, I don't know, maybe the first 16 or 18 issues of Nailbiter, and I really enjoyed it as well. That was an Image comic that he had done. These really beautiful covers, which drew me in right away. Definitely worth a read from what I remember of it. It's been 10 years since I think I've read that. Gore says the Williamson Flash run was really good. I think I read the first 28, 30 issues in single issues. And I thought it was good, but between Mark Waid's run and Jeff Johns' run, I didn't feel like it added much that I personally like connected with. My biggest problem with Williamson right now is that, as G mentioned, he's the architect at DC right now. He's the guy kind of overseeing things. And the reason I asked about this Batman story with Damien being in this pit is because they're doing this thing called, let's see if I can show it up here. It's called the DC KO, the DC Knockout. And there's this DCKO tie-in is what this one is. But basically, there's a tournament and Superman's in it, and there's this Omega Energy, and they've all got to fight. Like all the major superheroes have to fight, and there's this Mortal Kombat style tournament, which I could care less about. None of that interests me. It doesn't seem unique. I have no interest in seeing who wins this thing. But my biggest complaint is that then it seeps into every single DC title I've got. It's actually to the point where I was like, maybe I'm just going to drop almost all of my DC stuff and just focus on the 1 or 2 Marvel titles I have and the independent ones, because I'm tired of these. Like I get 2 months of issues that I don't care about at all, and they just kind of interrupt things. I'm not the biggest fan of Snyder on top of it. So then you put Williamson and Snyder together, and I kind of have a sour taste. Like you, for Love Comics, I'm a big fan of Tom King's writing. I know it's not for everybody, but I think his run that he's currently doing on Wonder Woman is going to be go down as one of the best runs. He planted stuff in like issues 4 or 5 that he then comes back to in like issue 22, and it's like, oh, he finally's tying this together in a really good, satisfying way. Like he's done some really cool stuff. So for me, Williamson's not bad by any means. There's a lot worse writers out there. He's definitely a good writer, but he doesn't sit with Ryan North. He doesn't sit with Tom King. He doesn't sit with Mark Waid. Doesn't sit with some of these guys that I really kind of connect with, at least for what I want out of my stories. Right. Yeah, but I think that's interesting that he just did this fighting challenge, this Mortal Kombat style challenge, and now they're doing that line wide thing.
That sounds familiar?
Is that the same one that they did for like the what was it now? Was it like fighting for like getting Omega power to save the DC universe or something?
Yeah, so basically, the Amanda Waller figures out, this is probably a couple of years ago now, where Amanda Waller figured out how to steal all the superheroes' powers, and then the superheroes got to unite and go get those powers back. And then when they get those powers back, they figured out that there's this Omega power as well. And I think it's Darkseid who set up this tournament where all these villains or all these superheroes have to face each other off. And so it's like it's bled into my Superman title, my Justice League Unlimited title. There's a bunch of the DC ones that I pick up on a monthly basis are now. And I don't care to see Green Lantern fight the Flash, and then whoever wins that's going to fight Wonder Woman. Whoever wins that, it just doesn't interest me. It feels like a trope that I don't need to see anymore. And stay off my lawn, by the way. I got my old man's soapbox.
Oh no, I mean, Secret Wars. I mean, we've had stuff like that all the time.
I think there's only so many times you can kind of read that stuff. I think I said when I was chatting with Phil and some of the other guys at one point that I was only going to read either Deceased or I forget, it was the one that I did read. The other one at the time, which was
Injustice.
Injustice. That's the one. Yeah, it was Injustice. I was only going to read Deceased or Injustice because I was like, they're basically both just Superman goes bad stories. Like I don't need to read that twice. The only difference is that one are going to have a bunch of vampire teeth or something. Yeah. So like,
well, and I'll point this out with the Williamson thing too. Just right now, Williamson, I think he's writing Superman, the regular Superman title. I can't remember if he's doing Action Comics as well. He might be, but he's doing Superman, and Mark Waid is doing Superman Unlimited. And there's just there's a clear-cut difference in the lore, understanding the lore, making it kind of fresh and unique in the writing ability that Waid brings. But that's because he's got a couple decades on Joshua as well. At some point, maybe Williamson will be at that level. But I mean, Waid's an expert at what he does. But I definitely prefer the Superman Unlimited that Waid's writing. Superman's perfectly fine. It's just not as memorable, right? There's nothing wrong with the stuff I've come across from Williamson. Like I said, some of it, like Nailbiter, I liked. Birthright, I've heard nothing but great things. I remember people that I was back in 2016 when I was doing YouTube stuff that were reading it as it was coming out single issues were just in love with it. So he's done a lot of great stuff, but it's different than overseeing, these characters who have 80 years of history and having editors to answer to and having these line wide things, he's got to contend with.
I mean, I think some of those. It's an interesting thing though, because like some of those writers that I would rate higher or better overall, like the Grant Morrisons and Mark Waid's out there, I don't think they're like perfect either. Like they don't play ball with other people very well. You know, like if Joshua's writing a story and has set a certain tone, and there's an event or a tie-in or something going along, or there's another book going alongside it, and Joshua's the architect of all that, and Mark Waid starts referencing a whole bunch of older stuff that Joshua's not referencing, then that feels like a bit of an asshole move. Personally, like I think he should play within what Joshua's playing within in that time, and like I've seen that with Grant Morrison things as well in the past, where like there was a crossover recently with it's Deadpool and Batman or something like that, and it was supposed to be fun crossover, like one story written by Marvel, one story written by DC, and Grant Morrison used it to like wrap up a story that he was doing in Animal Man and made it all about him, and it was just like, what are you doing? Like, I get that you're a good writer. I get that you're taking the opportunity to, tie all of your DC stuff together or whatever it is that you've kind of done. But at the same time, that's not what you were asked to do. Like, so like, I don't know. Like, I always find that kind of like weird. Like, I've read a few books recently where like even with like this Robin run, for instance, there's a book called like Batman versus Superman. It's supposed to like Batman versus Robin. It's supposed to kind of lead into the start of the Robin run. And there's a whole bunch of weird things that Mark Waid like references and talks about that's not in the run or has any like point to it. And it's clearly him showing off the lore and things that he knows, and that's cool. But it sets the complete wrong expectations for what's kind of coming forward, and it feels like there wasn't communication between the two people.
Yeah, who knows? There might not have been, right? Yeah, I don't see that conflict with the new Superman going on, but yeah, there might not have been that.
Because Waid might also not doing the Batman Superman book or something.
Yes, yeah, him and Dan Moore, where Dan Moore now. They got a new artist on it, maybe a year ago. And
so there's like a weird split in the Superman universe right now, where like half of it's done by Mark Waid and half of it's done by Joshua Williamson.
And my guess is that DC has basically said, well, you don't have any restrictions to a certain extent, Mark Waid. Yeah. Like, you're going to come and write for us because you were at, wasn't he the publisher, the editor at like Boom or something like that for quite a while then too. But I think that, in order to get him back, he's probably got the chops to say, well, if I'm going to come back, I don't want any constraints on me. I want to.
To get him and Dan Moore on a like a weekly or monthly book is crazy. Like, considering like Dan Moore just gets pulled left and right to do covers and create character designs and all the rest of it. Yeah. Like, he's still under contract with Boom for like a whole bunch of stuff that he does with Power Rangers.
Yeah. Well, and part of it for me too with Waid is that it's not maybe necessarily that he's diving into all the lore, but knows how to tell a really good story, and he knows how to explore areas that maybe haven't been looked at in a different way because of a couple extra decades of experience that he's got with reading, with writing, with working with these characters that have decades of canon behind them. He's just, there's just something, he's got a little extra something to it that resonates with me anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, speaking of one of those writers, I'll move us along a little bit. This was like this expert issue. So I've got this issue of the Fantastic Four by Ryan North. And this is part 3 of called The Invisible Woman. And so for those of you who don't, like, I get my books from my comic shop like once a month or so. I'll go down and I'll pick up my stuff from my mailbox once a month. So sometimes it's 6 weeks or 8 weeks in between reading issues. And this happened to be one of those where I'm like in part 3 and I picked it up. I'm like, oh shit, I don't remember what was going on. And one of the things I really, Marvel still continues to give you a nice little, lighting, my new lighting setup. They still give you a nice little blurb section, a recap, right? Which DC refuses to do for some reason. And so I was reading this recap and I'm like, I don't remember any of this, what's going on. But the thing I really appreciate about North is even without that, this could be a standalone issue. This is part 3. It's in the middle of one, but it reads like a complete story told within 22 pages or whatever it is, but it still fits within the larger arc that he's writing, which is great. And he goes back in this one and he goes back to the beginning of the Fantastic Four and starts talking about how when Sue first gets her powers, they don't really Reed basically tells her, well, hey, if you can control light, light is no different at the fundamental level than magnetism. Light is no different than microwave radiation. Light is no different. And he starts describing how this works scientifically. And so Sue doesn't know all the powers that she has. So she starts to kind of explore them, and he starts to work with her on it. And at one point, she has a dream where she's fighting all these demons, and she's fighting all these creatures, and she's using her powers. And then she wakes up and she finds that everything she did in the dream was actually happened in real life. And so she basically took out the entire world except for a couple people. And it's really cool at the so one of them that she doesn't take out is Johnny. And she says, well, I've got all this. She eventually goes to Johnny Storm. You see this real graphic picture here. And she says, I can turn my face invisible. I can turn my skull invisible. If you can use your fire to burn out my shame and my guilt, that part of my brain that keeps that, because I can't live with myself after everything I've done. And he ends up doing this. And then eventually they get in a fight and she kills him. And we find out at the end, I don't know if I should, yeah, it's just part 3. We find out at the end that Galactus had been calling her. And this is something that happened on a different world to a certain point. And so Sue Storm is going to come back as, where is it? Yeah. So there's the final page where she's kind of back as her multiple world person comes back, basically. But it's really interesting, like I said, for not remembering what was all going on in the story, and to pick this up and read it and be like, oh yeah, this was a great, like, complete issue in one that fits into the larger story. And yet I felt like I didn't have to read any of the first 2 to know what was going on and like be invested in it, which I think is really hard to do in today's day and age with comics. And that's part of Norse Fantastic Four run. I can't wait for it I'll be double dipping. I can't wait for it to come out in the omnibus format, because he's taken characters and he's really explored different areas. One of the issues that he explored was Johnny Storm being kind of the only bachelor as part of the Fantastic Four, and the loneliness. And Johnny falls in love with a really bizarre alien creature at one point, and just a lot of really cool stuff. That this North run is going to be a historic run, in my opinion. I think it's going to go down as one of those kind of a must-have runs.
So, sorry, I'm just trying to wrap my head around that story.
Yeah, there's a lot in there.
If she's the new, whatever the term is, sire of Galactus's herald, whatever the term is, does that mean that version of her is still in the alternate universe, or is she going to be coming into the mainstream universe? Like, how are they tying this into the main story?
Well, this right here, you can see Galactus kind of defeated, laying on the ground. This is the other Sue Storm, the one that killed her whole planet. That's what she did to Galactus. And Galactus was calling out to the Sue Storm of our Earth to come to her, and the Fantastic Four go and find her. And there's one reference here that I didn't get, but they basically say, Galactus says, our universe was recently made larger than we dreamed. But the more space and time that exist, the more room there is for everything to happen, sometimes more than once. So this idea that the Fantastic Four, if there's enough room for the possibility to happen, the Fantastic Four could happen on multiple planets, because it's just the laws of statistics. But then he made an editor's note here, and it says, this idea that the universe was recently made larger. He says it happened at the end of the Reckoning War in Fantastic Four number 45 from 2018. I didn't read that. I didn't know what that meant, but they do. So this is obviously something that happened, 8 years ago. And then they're kind of referencing back to this part of it. I don't remember what happened with it, but basically I think what's going to happen, is obviously our Sue Storm's going to have to battle this new invincible woman that's taken down Galactus and has all this power, or the Fantastic Four as a whole will have to battle this new woman. But I like the idea of him exploring, like, first Sue doesn't realize, like, oh, I can create a force field. Oh, I can bend light, when he's going back in time and talking about her initial discoveries of what her powers are.
Mhm.
And that's where Ryan North also lays out like, well, she's the most powerful person within the Fantastic Four. Like, it's really easy to figure out what Reed can do and what Ben Grimm can do, what Johnny can do. But Sue's powers, because she can control radiation waves and electromagnetic waves and magnetic waves and light, it's her imagination of how she can use these things is kind of unlimited to a certain extent. And so it's her trying to figure it out. And I just like North's continual exploration. The one thing that gets me though is just like 3 panels. It's about almost a full page or 2/3 of the page where he's describing the science behind all this works. And I'm like, it's way over my head, but he obviously knows what the hell he's talking about scientifically. Like, I need Neil deGrasse Tyson to come here and break it down for me so my ape mind can understand it. But Ryan North has a pretty good grasp on. And if he doesn't, if he's just BSing it, he sold it well enough that I believe he knows what he's talking about. You know?
I just kind of let that stuff go over my head because I was reading X-23 run bit recently where I think it was the one of the early runs, but she basically babysits the kids of the Fantastic Four, and like one of the kids has like a sort of like matter changing type like power, and basically like they're watching a show about like dinosaurs or something, and she like turns it into basically like a portal, and they end up going into these dinosaurs world, and they have shenanigans.
Cool.
But it's quite a fun kind of story within that. But they do try and throw the sort of science of how it would work around it, and it's like yeah, whatever, like they turned the TV into a portal. I mean, like, how am I going to understand the science of that? So yeah.
Yeah, I love this run that North is doing that. It's just
but it sounds like an
rewarding.
interesting way to explain I guess the dynamics of how powerful Sue's powers are by giving her evil version to fight, because it means that she can still at the end of the story be the good person, but the bad person can show just how powerful the good version is by doing the bad things that the good person can't do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I mean,
so
like,
it allows you to see
possible?
the full extent of her powers. Yeah.
It's just been such a great run. Really, there's been so many spots where he's got a great way of, especially so they did that thing, that Marvel likes to do, where he does 30 issues and then they keep the same creative team and they start at number 1 again. I hate that, but at the same time, the first part of his run that he did, there were a number of issues that were just 1-issue arcs, and I love that. It's so rare to do that today with writers, where it's on a consistent basis, where a writer can you tell me a good story in 22 pages and a complete story in 22 pages? It's the same thing I argue about with novels to a certain extent. The old science fiction guys used to be able to write 250 pages and tell a great story. And now everything's a trilogy, or it's got its own universe, and we've got all these tie-ins, and it just gets so bloated that at the heart of it, what people really need is a good editor to come in. North just, for whatever reason, just seems to really know how to tell a good story in 22 pages, and I respect that from him.
Yeah, I haven't read this, but I mean, just talking about people whose stuff, I've read Ryan North's earlier Fantastic Four run, the one that I think he did. Now I don't remember what the years were, but the one before this in 2025. So that's what I found to be so much fun about that there were so many one-shots, and they were all like these little Twilight Zone or Outer Limits sort of thing. And I was reading it at the same time as The Immortal Hulk, and The Immortal Hulk right at the beginning had that sort of episodic classic Hulk sort of going from town to town, and that's what the Fantastic Four ended up being like as well, like a road trip story or a camping story, and then just encountering these weird things. And Ryan North he's a writer I really enjoy, but he's also a person, like, just like with the Squirrel Girl comics that he'd done, that sort of got me introduced to his superhero stuff. It's just like he makes them accessible for people who don't read those superhero comics, but also rewarding for people who are lifelong fans. And I think that's just an incredible balancing act to pull off, to be able to that accessible and that self-contained and that one-shot feeling, but also for new readers and oldie readers alike. Just as you were talking Matt, I was looking up this series and seeing if the trades are available over here, because that's definitely one of those writers whose trades I will happily jump on. And like I can get 2 or 3 of those trades and feel like I'm in safe hands, especially after that glowing review.
Yeah, and I feel like North is one of those. As you're talking about this, it just resonates. Like if I was a 9 or 10-year-old kid, and this is what I was reading, this would inspire me to want to be a comic writer. This is the stuff that would, as a kid, was like. I remember, like, those issues or those characters that you grabbed, and it was just historic, and you're like, oh my god, this is what I need. As an adult, I feel that way, and I imagine as like a 9 or 10-year-old kid reading this would be a great spot for kids to get on, because there's a lot of good, wholesome messages in it as well, but it's not boiled down to a 3rd grade level. He's just an expert at what he does, in my opinion. At least with this run, has been just phenomenal.
Yeah, and I think that speaking of that science part of it, that's also something I got from the previous run, is that he's got quantum physics and chemistry and all of that stuff swirling around, but it's also, I thought, a perfect pulp use of those concepts, to where, like, as heady and as complex as they can be, it's still being used to tell very entertaining stories. There's one story in his earlier run that's all told from this sort of alien life form's point of view, and just generations passing. Speaking of time dilation, of passing within this spaceship and these kind of spectral images, but we get to understand that these are the Fantastic Four. We can see that that's Sue and that's Reed, and and it's just like generation or decades passing, and they keep seeing these ghostly figures, and it's just a scientific examination of the spaceship in which these creatures are trapped, and they're sensing the Fantastic Four from outside, who are moving at a different time than they are. So they've got like it was just incredible, but it was so much fun to read. I really felt in many ways that Ryan North reminds me of Rod Serling, in which he can take these sort of ideas and then make these entertaining stories out of things that are quite intellectual and quite pulpy at the same time. And I'm a big fan, and I know that Ryan North's written a bunch of other stuff, not just comics. And one of his non-comics works that I was very interested in was, I think he's got 1 or maybe 2 books out now on how to survive the apocalypse and how to build things, like if the world has ended. And I was just like, that's the guy who I would want telling me about how to, how to put things together, how to put machines together, because he obviously has the scientific brain, but he also has the talent to explain it to smooth-brained apes like us.
Yeah. Well, that was mine. So what about you for Love Comics? What did you have to share? What have you been reading besides Strangers in Paradise?
Right, yeah, it's all Strangers in Paradise all the time. I did get to do a couple of things. One of them is just a brand new thing that I haven't gotten to read a lot of, and I read a couple of stories in the Savage Sword of Conan, the new magazine that's coming out right now. And I kind of like vaguely heard about this, but I hadn't much idea. And then when I saw this on sale, I was like, I'm going to try it out, because I am a big fan of Savage Sword, those black and white comics from ages ago. And this is a sort of revival of that, from what I understand, unless it's been going on and I've just sort of missed it. But I think this is a revival, and it had stories right at the beginning by John Arcudi, Jim Zub, artists Joe Jusko and Max von Fafner. But in issue 3, there was a story by Frank Thierry and drawn by Carrie Nord. And I'm a big fan of Carrie Nord on Conan. I've seen the earlier stuff, which I really loved. So I've read the first story over here, and I kind of skipped forward to issue number 2, because they're all kind of standalone stories. I don't know if you know. So the first one had this really cool art style up to a certain point. It felt very classic, very, what can I say? Like P. Craig Russell almost. There's some very classic storytelling artwork, but done in this nice shaded black and white. and that was quite interesting. And then there is this monster dragon that attacks when they're putting this city under siege, and this elephant going flying is very cool. And then this monster, this dragon, turns out to be a T-Rex. And then there's something like a little photographic, I think, especially with the architecture back there. I mean, I don't think it's photo reference, but it feels like that. You know what I mean? Like if you look at the rocks over here.
Yeah.
And I wasn't quite sure how I felt about that. I'm not usually a fan of photo backgrounds in my comics, but the foreground art and the line work seemed so impressive, and the action was great. Over here. So this is like the classic pulpy. It really felt like it scratched that itch of that classic Savage Sword of Conan, but also brought something a little new, that sort of three-dimensionality, the physicality of it. It felt a little bit more modern, although I'm not sure I want that much modern, where the digital work is looking like photographic work. That might be a little too much, but this kind of stuff over here, I think, is really, really good. And, I enjoyed this story, but then looking at the next story, I kind of just jumped forward. I mean, it looks pretty good. It's written and drawn by someone I'm not familiar with, Patrick Zurcher. But this looked interesting, but I wanted to, and so this is again a pretty good use of black and white. It's not just line art. You can see like the blacks and the grays are really filled in, and that gives it a certain sort of classic weight, I feel, but not like a newspaper comic. It's a very different style. So it does feel updated. It does feel modern, and maybe it's been there throughout. I've just not seen it necessarily. I wish I had thought to bring one of my older Savage Sword, but this kind of stuff. But what I wanted to get to was the Carrie Nord story. But we've got cool pinups and cool cover art, and I think it's interesting because they're giving different writers and different artists, as Savage Sword does, and I like that sort of anthology approach to. I mean, I like it when it's the same writer and artist doing a series for a while, but I also like getting these different styles in there. And you can see how different this art style is, for example, from the one that we saw before. But what I wanted to get to,
and were they basically like 22 issues, or are they smaller anthology page numbers?
They seemed longer, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the first story was definitely a longer story because I didn't read the whole, because I didn't read it, sorry, in order. I think there are three issues in this thing, so I think they're definitely longer than 22 pages. Yeah, that's a very thick. That's a very thick collection for 3 issues. So it's magazine sized, but it's also a hefty weight. But then there was this werewolf story, Wolves of the Tundra, with art by Carrie Nord. And this is the guy who did the Born on the Battlefield stuff. He was doing the main series, and the flashback series was by Greg Ruth in the Conan run that I really liked. And this art is just lovely. I love Carrie Nord's artwork. I love his stuff. And this is a little different, but it still feels, it's like old fashioned and new. It's that classic, sort of like this is feels like Alex Toth or someone like that, but you also have a cartoonish kind of simplicity. You're not trying to be too 3-dimensional or too photorealistic in that way. And I just love this. And I thought this was a magnificently illustrated story. It felt it just scratched that sort of classic pulp itch, so to speak. But I haven't read more of this, And this actually arrived very badly bent. I don't know if you can see this, but the pages are damaged. So I've actually asked for this to be returned, and it's going to be picked up in the next couple of days. So I was, it's going to be replaced. So it's not like I'm going to read it and then give it back. So hopefully I get a new copy. I was a little worried that I was asking for it to be replaced and I wouldn't get a new copy of it. So I haven't read any more of this because I don't want to damage it further or be blamed for that. But I'm excited about having this format and these comics. I mean, there's always a chance with an anthology that not everything will be of the same quality, but it does give me an opportunity to revisit a favorite like Carrie Nord, or like read something by Arcudi, whom I haven't read stuff by in ages. I mean, I'm trying to remember what the last John Arcudi stuff I read was. But it also gets me introduced to some new writers and artists who I may not have heard of, with a character that I really like. So that's sort of my half a new read, or not even really half a new read, 2 out of the 9 stories that this collection contains. But both of them, in very different ways, are stories that I enjoyed. So I'm looking forward to reading the rest of this new Savage Sword of... I don't know what this is, a revival or a rebirth or something like that. I know that the series had gone away. This particular title had gone away for a while, and people were glad to see it's back, and I'm glad to have this collection, because obviously we didn't get the magazine singles over here, but that might have been something that I would have picked up just for the format and looking at the art in that size.
Yeah, that second section you showed where it was more detailed. That reminded me of was it Rucka who did Black Magic with Jenny Frison, maybe? It came from Image Comics probably 6-7 years ago. He'd done a couple. I think it was called Black Magic. It reminded me of that, where you had the black and white with the grayscale, but it was really detailed in a really beautiful way. It kind of reminded me of some of that. And speaking of Rucka, I think he's the one who's writing the new Savage Sword, if I remember right. I think I saw that online.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think so. Gord mentioned in the comments that it's been sold out of the shop. So he just mentioned, it was Rucka. And he also offered representation. So if you need to sue somebody to get your money back for the book or a good copy, we know Gord knows some lawyers. But Rucka's on the new Savage Sword. I know somebody online that I respect that knows comics has been gushing over those as well, each issue as it comes out.
Right, because over here, issue 1, issue 2, and issue 3. So I'm guessing that Rucka is doing subsequent issues. So I'm guessing that they're changing, because we've got, even in issue 1, there's writers John Arcudi. The second story is by Jim Zub, and the third one is by Patch Zerker. And then again, Jim Zub and Richard Pace is the artist. And then again, The Hunt Part 2. So there are some stories that are continuations. So like there's Part 1 in issue 1 and Part 2 in issue 2. And then there are other short stories. So it really does seem to have an anthology approach. I wonder if they've changed that after the first 3 issues. But the first 3 issues definitely seem to be anthologies and not... I mean, there is a continuing story. There's a Part 1 and Part 2, but there are other stories as well. So it doesn't quite seem to be a typical ongoing in that way. It seems to be like...
Who's publishing that?
This is Titan Comics. Yeah. So I guess so this is the first edition from October 24. So they'd probably be on, I don't know how often they're bringing out, if it's a monthly. Gore seems to be in the know. It might be... It's a monthly, yeah. So there would probably be a couple more volumes of this out right now. But yes, I think I'm looking for the replacement of this, and the next. I'll keep going with it because it feels like my cup of tea. Sorry, Highlandji.
No, it's just I was thinking. I thought recently that the Conan stuff all moved back to Marvel.
Is that what it is? Because this is definitely Titan Comics.
I was pretty sure that
it may, and that's who Rucka
Marvel was reprinting all the Conan omnibuses, and they were all under the Marvel imprint now. Like they wouldn't be the colossal size that they were done, previously by, I forget who it was that done the various different ones, because I think at one point, Savage Sword and Conan the Barbarian and so on and so forth were licensed out to different publishers.
Yeah,
I
well,
think
the
Marvel
classic
has it
series that I
all
remember
back
is
now,
from
as far
Dark
as I
Horse.
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Dark Horse had Savage Sword, or those are the 8 volumes or 9 volumes that I have are from Dark Horse. But this is, I think it's called the Savage Sword magazine. So I don't know if it was a short-lived thing before it came back to Marvel, or maybe it's with Marvel now and they've rebooted the whole thing. And that might be a continuing series, and that's what Greg Rucka is doing. Yeah, this is definitely an anthology series from Titan.
I just wonder with the licensing stuff like that, because Conan being a licensed property, I know when I was trying to buy the various Buffy books, and they started out with Dark Horse, and then Boom got the rights later on. The moment Boom got the rights to the property, Dark Horse were no longer allowed to print a single page of their stuff because they lost the rights.
Right.
Yeah.
So I just wonder if Titan will still have the rights to that specific spin-off, or if they've, maybe just got a back stock of books that are available. Maybe.
I want to just mention in the comments too, John George Pepperez, love that name. He mentioned that the Black Magic artist was Nicola Scott. Thank you. That's who I was trying to think of and couldn't remember. Yeah. Only 3 pieces of her art and 2 from that series. That's some of my favorite artwork, is just looking at the black and white stuff and the grayscale that he does on that Black Magic. It's just such beautiful work. And I fell in love with Scott, I think, from when she was doing Rucka's Wonder Woman. I think her and Liam Sharp were doing the when Rebirth came about. Is it Wonder Woman? I think maybe it was Green Lantern, I think. Anyways, Nicola Scott's the one. Beautiful artist, man. I really like her work.
Yeah, I'm just quickly looking this up, and this one came out in November of 24, and I can see volume 3 came out in 4th of November 25. But that one says Roy Thomas. So I guess Roy Thomas must be back, because Roy Thomas is the guy who's Savage Sword of Conan I remember reading from Dark Horse. So this must not be a reprint of that, because this looks like it's from Titan. So at least until November of 25, which, isn't that long ago, it was still Titan publishing this. So the Marvel thing must either be a parallel rights thing, or it's a more recent move away, like in the last few months, because...
Yes, so just quickly, just looking at the Wikipedia, it says Marvel got the rights in 2018 to everything, but they gave specifically the Savage Sword of Conan rights to do collected editions in 2022 to Titan Comics, and they're allowed to reprint any editions that they've done in the past in these new collected editions, but they're not allowed to do completely new stuff, it says. But they did get a window to do 12 issues, it says. So it sounds like they got to do 12 new issues and they're allowed to reprint their old stuff, but they don't have overall rights to Conan. Conan's still owned by Marvel. They've just been given a token gesture.
Okay, right. So
at least that means you can get them.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think if volume 3 came out in November, then we should see another one of them pretty soon, and that should be the last one.
Book, did you say?
Three of them. So that would be 9 so far, and the last 3 would be in volume 4, and that'll be that.
So that would be at least 4 volumes if it's new material.
If they keep it at 3, yeah. But given the size of it, I think they'll keep it at 3. And I really like like this one is good. If it wasn't damaged, I would definitely be, reading more of it. But yeah, I'm probably going to. I can see, just looking online quickly, that I can see that Zurcher continues to be in volume 2, etc. So his story might be a continuing longer story. And I know that Jim Zub and, but I don't see Carrie Nord. I mean, okay, fine. I'll be happy with the one story I have.
Just quickly to the Rucka thing, he's probably writing the Marvel mainstay book.
Right. Not Savage Sword, but just Conan the Barbarian then maybe.
I would have thought so.
Yeah. That might be it then. or he's going to take over Savage Sword once it's back from Titan.
Maybe as a continuation or
Yeah.
his own take.
Worth
but
taking a look.
Usually with these kind of things, they're given a bit of freedom, so we'll see.
Cool. Yeah, but this is good. I mean, I recommend what little I've seen of it, but then again, I haven't seen that much of it. Is Matt stuck? I'm not sure. I think I heard his audio, but his video hasn't. Either he's really focused in on us, or he's stuck.
I think he's stuck. I did wonder for a second. I was like, what?
Yeah, like we have shocked him into petrification. And in Europe, new Conan books. I'm reading what Gore Vidal is saying. They don't call it Conan. They call it the Cimmerian. Yeah, interesting. Speaking of which, how does one? I mean, like I say Conan, and then I say Conan, but do I mean Conan like Conan O'Brien? Is it Conan the Barbarian, or does it go either way?
It's spelt Conan, but I presume you can just say it either way.
Conan the Barbarian doesn't sound
Conan,
right? I mean, like it's been a long, and I guess I saw one of the Arnold Schwarzenegger movies when I was a kid, but I think that's Conan, right?
Yeah, Conan.
Conan, right? Okay, all right. No, just checking.
Yeah. But yeah, Cimmerian's an interesting one where, again, they write Conan stories. They just don't use the word Conan.
Right. Like, must be a copyright thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or rights and licensing stuff.
It's one of these things where, like, you can only own the rights to the original version of things for so long. One of those things that, like, Disney's learning the hard way, where your properties just slowly kind of move out into the open. I mean, it's going to happen with a version of Batman soon enough.
Yeah, but they keep putting their own spin on it. That's why you're supposed to keep changing the costume and all of that stuff, so that you can keep resetting it.
That doesn't stop the original version being used, though. So, like, for instance, when Superman loses its original copyright, it'll be for the Superman in the classic bodybuilder suit with the wiggly S, and that'll be the only version people are allowed to use. They won't be able to use the current version of Superman because that license is current.
So it goes from like 65 years from the death of the creator or something like that. There's a period of time.
But I mean,
so
like, the current
that clock just keeps
under
resetting.
Copyrights,
right? But again, that will also expire. That will also expire in 65 years' time. But then totally. They'll have created a new costume by then.
Yeah. And that's why Mickey's been split into being Steamboat Mickey and classic Mickey, and so that they can at least slow down that process a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, inevitably they all end up kind of out there, and people write stories as fan fiction anyway and just don't ask permission. So it's one of those kind of things. But
I just recently heard about I forget what the word is, and someone can maybe look this up also, but there's an entire thing in Japan which is like a fanzine, but it's like a fan fiction zine. It's like people writing their own Attack on Titan stories or their own Berserk adventures and stuff like that, and then they have conventions and they sell these to other readers. So I forget what the word is, or maybe I'm but it's a thing. It's like fan fiction taken to a whole different level, and obviously it doesn't play very nice with copyright, etc. But it seems to be a subculture that is embraced by many creators in some ways as well. So it's interesting to see how it's different. But I think they're trying to do some of these, but they're going to run into trouble if they start doing Star Wars and Disney stuff, etc. Or Harry Potter. Those places are pretty litigative, from what I know, litigious.
Yeah, but I mean, by the time the Harry Potter copyrights were to run out, I don't think people would be very bothered about Harry Potter at that point.
Yeah, you never know. As long as, J.K. Rowling's lawyers are bothered, it's going to be a bother, and I think that,
Well, yeah, I mean,
and when you've got like, I don't know, Warner Brothers or whatever, they're not going to let people come over things. But anyway, that's our first round of recent reads. Have you been super productive, Highland G, and have you got more than one recent read on top of Strangers in Paradise? We're just going to say on top of Strangers in Paradise over
top of
and
the
over
Paradise.
again.
I do. I've got a second book that I've read. It was a fairly quick read, actually. I'll make me bigger so you can see. I don't know if you heard that, somebody shouting outside. Anyway, this is what I've read recently, which is a book by Robert Kirkman, just came out in the deluxe edition. I originally read it in the singles, and this was quite an interesting, again, both book and how it kind of came out, because it wasn't actually announced. It was literally just sent to comic shops. Like, he didn't bill them like for the first couple of issues. He literally just sent out to their doors and they got it with their deliveries.
Huh.
And it was a complete surprise kind of thing that was going to put out there. And basically it's this sort of assassin spy story. There's a bunch of sort of higher up politicians within the kind of American government that run their own little kind of cartel, for want of a better kind of word, and they go around fixing the world and what they perceive as the ways to kind of correct things. And the different ones have different levels of what they perceive as acceptable, I guess, costs to get whatever kind of greater good. And our sort of main characters here that we kind of follow is there's actually 4 brothers, and they were all sons of this sort of main assassin guy, and they learnt off their kind of dad, and he named them after the Beatles, so they're like Paul, Ringo, and so on. And one of them basically didn't survive the training. He kind of wimped out, and the dad told them to kind of take him out because he's a lost cause. And so we only really see the main kind of 3 in the story, apart from a kind of flashback. But before I show the actual kind of book, the one thing that was disappointing with this a little bit is that they didn't keep the cover issues as the sort of issue dividers. They took them out and just left the sort of die page, which I'll show in a second. But the other thing is they included the covers at the back, but they didn't include them as any of the sort of variant covers. So like the standard covers are just kind of quite action-packed kind of pictures, and they're not, anything to kind of, mount on your. I mean, I wouldn't mount that on my wall. It's just a random kind of pose, but it's nice enough kind of art. But the cool thing was there was then variants done where they added speech bubbles to it, and there was like randomized speech bubbles again that just turned up in. We don't know what the numbers were of like what ones were what kind of thing. They just kind of turned up at comic books sellers kind of stores. And again, this was part of Kirkman's way of trying to sort of reinvigorate people to go into comic stores randomly and kind of check out things, because they just never would know what's there. It's his way of kind of saying, well, kind of go in, check in more often, and you might see something kind of turn up. There might be like mid-week deliveries and kind of random stuff like that kind of going on. So there was these ones with like different kind of like speech bubbles, and they would just say kind of different things. So this one's like, think we got him, yep. And they're like totally covered in blood. And they'd be like different variants of the kind of speech bubbles. There's this one, and he's got his nose chopped off. And then there's one of the guy's partners when she's gonna fight one of the other brothers, and it just says "mine's bigger." She's got a massive samurai sword. So like, I thought they were great and really good fun when I read it in singles just a few years back now, and it's kind of disappointing that you get those same covers, but there's nothing on them at the back of the book. So it's just like it's not really that great. But you get these die pages that pop up throughout the issues, which is basically every issue. They'll get to a point where someone goes, "You're going to," and then it'll cut to the page that goes die, or like whatever. So it always kind of leads up to that, and you get art through the words.
Oh yeah.
So there's usually one of those per issue. I think one of the issues there's kind of two, so you can still kind of treat those as your kind of issue stop points, if you like. But there's no actual issue breaks. They just kind of go one into the other. The story is really funny, and overall it's a parody of a lot of American kind of politicians from the kind of time just before kind of Trump got elected. So you've got a sort of Hillary Clinton type, you've got the mention of Trump type, they've got Obama as the president at the time. He actually is called Obama, but everybody else in the thing is just like a knockoff version. Maybe they didn't want to get sued by the Clintons. But like they have a sort of Bernie Sanders kind of looking type guy, although very, kind of psychotic and not what I would perceive Sanders to kind of do. And yeah, so they play all these different kind of like stereotypes in things, and you can kind of see, as I said, kind of straight away which kind of characters kind of look like who. There's the kind of, like I said, the kind of Bernie and Hillary kind of types. And the whole thing is this kind of somewhat balance between really extreme humorous action and somewhat really, really dark subject matter. So like they'll be talking about all sorts of things that are going on behind the scenes and messed up stuff, and I say in American politics, and then things going on maybe in like their personal lives, and maybe like literally a person might go to like a furry party or something like that, and like there's no holds barred as far as like how dark they can kind of go, like as far as the overall things. But then you'll just get some real ridiculousness out of kind of nowhere as well. It's like one of the spies has a daughter, and she's just like this kind of crazy wannabe kind of a assassin. So whenever she gets her hands on his gun or finds something around the house she can try and attack someone with, she just starts like pointing the gun at people, and that's the kind of nanny taking the gun back off of her. But there was one sequence a bit further on where like she does actually get loose, like the dad lets her take somebody on, and it's just like one of these sequences from like an X-23 comic or something. So she just like blasts the whole place up. Let's see if we can find it quickly. Here we go.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, as if from the absolute kind of outset, it's just kind of going for this kind of shock vibe. Like, I don't know if you both read Invincible at all, but where like Invincible has this kind of like normal, calm kind of thing for a certain amount of issues, and then has like a turning point, and you realize that you're in a very different world very quickly. There's a similar kind of thing that kind of goes on here, where you've got this kind of like somewhat still kind of bloody, but kind of like spy scene going on of various kind of stuff, and then it cuts to this massive picture of him slicing off his nose. And I'm like, oh, I know what book I'm reading now. I get it. So Yeah, I really enjoy it. I found it relatively cheap. I think it was like somewhere around like 30 quid or something like that, for the whole kind of thing. This is the complete run as of now. It's kind of in two halves. There's kind of like a beginning arc, which is more about the kind of brothers and their rivalry, and a little bit of Highlander vibes. There can only be one, kind of thing. And they've taken different paths in life. So one's willing to kind of, kill at all costs, and one's more kind of like secluded themselves, and one's kind of like tried to build a family, and they've got kind of different focuses and kind of stuff. But one last thing I did want to kind of show is there's a bit towards the end, just to kind of show the absolute extreme of things, where Obama's basically had to overthrow the rules of the American government to go into a third term to stop Trump becoming president. But not just because he doesn't agree with Trump's politics, but because the president of the United States has to, once every 4 years, go into space and fight for Earth's sovereignty to not be part of the space community. Because if they are, then they're open grabs for any species to have a go at Earth. So they have to have this fight in space. And there's this one panel that is Obama fighting with these like basically like Galactus gloves, and Kirkman's basically told the artist to throw copyright out the window, and they've drawn every space creature they can think of from science fiction in the background of this ring. From like Batman to Alan the Alien to like you name it. I think there's like Kirby O'Hare somewhere. Like, there's everybody.
Oh wow! It reminds me of the Jimmy Olsen that was Fraction did, where he's got him fighting kind of with all the superheroes in the background, where you've got them all like that. Kind of reminds you of something similar. That's cool.
I think it's just one of those moments where it's like they can't all sue us.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've got a list in the back of the book, like naming all the characters, and it literally says not Batman, not this, not that. Like as it goes through the list, it's quite funny.
Yeah, that's great. I like what I like the premise behind what Kirkman did. It's the instead of doing like, oh well, we're gonna get 25 issues into a run like Marvel does, we're gonna keep the same creative team and just renumber at one. There's my gimmick to get people to pick up my issues. Or we're going to have these line-wide events, these marketing things that are going to try to keep people in. Instead, Kirkman does this other thing that says, hey, you never know when new stuff's going to show up. It doesn't have to be solicited. It could show up on a Tuesday. It could show up on a Friday. I like that idea for how to get people into your LCS versus the stuff that the big two are doing. It seems unique, but it seems like something that would draw me in versus just renumbering.
And then also the odds of getting, the one of this that has the cool saying on it that you like without having to pay like, 20-30 pound to get the variant, like you just get this because you happen to pick up this one.
Yeah. Cool. Die. Yeah. Good.
It's a bit of a pain for search engines when you're trying to like find it, because the exclamation marks is part of the title, so it's die exclamation die exclamation die exclamation if you're searching for it. Because if you just put die, it'll bring up Kieran Gillen's Die. It won't actually bring up, which is a very different book about D&D type stuff.
All right, I'll grab one here. Let's see. I'll do a quick thing. So yeah, here's one of those where it was Justice League Unlimited with the stupid DC knockout tie-in, which there's like 2 or 3 issues that they've taken over my monthly book. I'll just mention real quickly Jeff Lemire's Minor Arcana, and this is from this is Boom. Where I thought this one of the things I thought was really interesting about this was at the end of the very first issue, they put this promo at issue number 1. And at the very end, it says, a long-form series from the creator of Sweet Tooth to be collected in 4 deluxe hardcovers. So talk about boom in issue number 1 saying, we're going to put together 4 of these. We're with this from the beginning to the end. And this is issue 14. And one of the things I really like about it is, I don't know if it'll work with my lighting, but Lemire does the artwork and then he's got a colorist. But Lemire's artwork, if you followed him over the last, decade plus, he's really refined it. It still has his same signature, but I find it not much improved, but just refined. I find like he's honed in on exactly what he likes, even a little bit more. It's still his noticeable artwork, but it just looks so good. Some of these pages are just really incredible. And
so does he do just the pencils then, or is he is he doing like painted art that someone's like coloring over? Like how does it?
Yeah, it's written.
Is there an inker basically? Like how does that work?
No, it's just there's a colorist and a letterer, and Lemire's doing. They said writing and illustration. So okay. I don't know if he's. I'm assuming he's doing pencils and maybe.
I just wonder because sometimes he'll do more kind of like painted type stuff within the same style. So I wonder if there's like a mix of pencils, inks, paints.
Yeah. They got him listed as written and illustrated by, and so like this is the opening.
Yeah, so he's just illustrator. That kind of covers it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But it's one of these like kind of I'm not gonna say one of the typical stories, but he the woman in here returns home to a town that she left. She's got an alcohol problem. She comes back to her mom, who's reads tarot cards for a living, has a psychic shop, and her mom's dying of cancer. And this girl who returns home doesn't believe in any of the psychic stuff, and then has to step in for her mom. And then starts to have some of these psychic experiences, and the story unravels from there. And it was really interesting because there's been a couple times where I'm like, well, maybe I need to cut down on my pull list. Maybe I'll cut down on this and wait for the deluxe to come out. And then an issue will grab me, like just really grab me like Lemire does and hold me to it. And I haven't been able to. And I've really, the longer it's went on, the more I've really started to enjoy it. Ultimate Superman. I'm sorry, Ultimate Spider-Man. This was the last one. Man, was this a challenge. They released an issue in October, and then it took 2 months. And then they released an issue in December, and then it took 2 months. And then this was the final issue of what kicked off Marvel's Ultimate Universe. And it was really funny because here's the blurb in the front of Marvel's recap, just to kind of fill you into how confusing this universe has become. So 20 years ago, the Maker prevented a radioactive spider from biting a young Peter Parker. He likewise prevented the creation of any other superheroes and formed a secret council to rule the world from the shadows. 23 months ago, Tony Stark sent Peter that same radioactive spider along with a Picotech suit. Since then, Peter has used the incredible powers granted by the spider's bite to fight crime as Spider-Man, joined by his friend Harry Osborn, aka Green Goblin. For nearly 2 years, they've been fighting the Kingpin of New York and his Sinister Six. Kraven was killed. Mole Man changed teams and brought the Parker family to safety underground. The first Black Cat was paralyzed, and the second is too tied up with Peter's son, Richard. And Harry's wife, Gwen Stacy, turned out to be 1/5 of Mysterio, privately waging war against them as her own.
Spider-Man.
Yeah, until Mr. Negative bombed the council of Mysterio, and the 5 united into one. Now it's time for the final strike against Kingpin, but Green Goblin and Mysterio are meeting with Captain Britain, and Spider-Man's fighting for his life to keep Kingpin and Mr. Negative away from his son and Black Cat. And I went after 2 months, I'm like, what the hell happened? Like, I don't remember most of it. Like, that's just a big synopsis for just putting out 3 issues in 5 months and trying to keep up with everything that's going on. It's still a really good, this is, a Hickman run. From what I understand, he was slated to just do the 24 issues and then he was going to be done with it. And the real bummer is then, then they've got you to tie into, oh, well, you got to go pick up the miniseries Ultimate Endgame to really find out what's happened. And I dumped all the other Ultimate titles from it, except for Spider-Man, because Spider-Man was really good, but I wasn't enjoying the other ones. And finally, I'll give one more, just real quick one before I hand over to For the Love of Comics, because this is the one that I thought I was really going to like and didn't. And it was one of these anthology type things where they've got, it's Wonder Woman Black and Gold. and they've got 4 stories in here. And the first one is, a little girl shows up to this Wonder Woman museum, and she's going to get to meet. She won some contest, so she's going to get to meet with Wonder Woman. And of course, Wonder Woman doesn't show up after the first hour because she's off fighting somebody and saving the world. And then the second, and it just felt like this trope of that they do with these like 8-issue comics, with these anthologies where they're trying to, the superhero's going to be here to meet somebody for something really good in the public realm, but they're tied up fighting somebody. And it just didn't feel original at all. And the last one of the 4, instead of going through all of them, just has this really, for me, it feels like that 2nd grade art. And it's Wonder Woman as a young girl. Somebody's stealing the peaches from a tree. And so she's not going to be able to get her peach cobbler. And so she's got to find out a mystery. And it turns out the Jumpy the kangaroo has basically been stealing the peaches. But for $6, I felt really ripped off with this one. It was just like 4 stories that I'll never read again, don't care about. It was almost like I was thinking of you, Highland G, like when you used to tear up the outside of your Blu-ray boxes. I was thinking about doing that with this. Like, I just do not care about this one at all. So pretty disappointed. And that was going to be my question. We'll have to maybe cover it some other time because I know we're running short on time here. But there's this idea of, DC's holiday Christmas special, these anthology ones. I don't think I've ever come across one that's been real memorable personally, but maybe we can shelf that and come back to that for some kind of topic at a different point. Just cause I know we're getting near time here. But yeah, that couple of the other ones that I read anyways.
I feel like maybe the Harley one might have been popular, like red, black and white or something like that. Because it had a continuation of the, Stepan Sedge story, like from Harleen.
Oh, okay.
Like it had a slight continuation of that in it, to do Poison Ivy and her, and there was a couple of other people that were pretty decent in that one, I think. And then I think after that they were just like, oh, well, Wonder Woman wears gold, and such and such wears this, and they just did like, how many can we pump out?
Yeah, and it just
various ways.
I think you have to have, as I talked about earlier, when you have this day and age where it seems like everybody's writing for a 6-issue arc, and that's how they're creating stories, that these guys that stand out to me, like Ryan North, that can do a 22-issue complete story. Now you're asking these writers that are writing these arcs to cut down your story to 6 to 8 pages and try to tell me a complete story that's, that's just got a full story. There's got to be a real skill to be able to do that. And I've found very few writers that can actually put that into, can execute in that route.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, because again, Ryan North's Fantastic Four, as I was saying, but that's one of the things why Astro City has always been such a great classic comic to me, is that there are these long arcs in the middle, but almost half of that long-running comic series are just one-shots.
Yeah.
And to have that many, Usagi Yojimbo is another one that, I think of as a series that has just incredible storytelling chops for a single issue, and then doing it over decades. There's a reason why those things stand out. And of course, there are many things along those lines. Like once you think of Usagi, I can think of Gru and Sergio Aragonés, and I think that's one of those things that comedic comics, I think, have done a lot better in some ways, and I can see that working in comedic comics and, like even from the Golden Age and Silver Age, like Blondie and all of those kind of comics that we grew up with, and Harvey comics with Richie Rich, Casper, Archie comics. They were all meant to be, they were all sort of like, I grew up reading one-shot comics. It's the longer series, and writing for arcs was a much more recent phenomenon, until the point where it feels like that long, ongoing, continuing continuity thing is the only way. And once again, this is very contextual because it's American comics. Again, European comics have been but again, Japanese comics run for like, literally hundreds and hundreds of issues. But they seem to have they still have a fixed continuity. So like if you don't constantly have reboots and retcons and resetting to number one. I mean, like, it might be a long story, but usually if something happens, it's a significant part of canon and it gets kind of frozen in there. But that one shot, it's, to me, it's very nostalgic. It's very reminiscent of reading the Superman adventures, or I saw earlier this discussion on the Legion of Superheroes, and I loved reading some of these old Legion of Superhero, sort of pulpy sci-fi, retro futuristic sci-fi type of things, and they were just one and dones, and I couldn't wait to read another one because it would just be something totally ridiculous. And every now and then people would say, like we saw in that adventure, or you'll have a return, and it would make you feel. And that's, I think, the last time I can think about something like that being done very, very deliberately, that I think we should see more of, is what Alan Moore was doing with America's Best Comics, and what he was doing with Tom Strong, and I think even Tom Strong mainly, but unlike, say, Promethea or League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which had longer kind of things, he had Tomorrow Stories, which was all one shots and all standalone short stories, etc. I agree with you. I just love that kind of storytelling. I think it takes some serious writing chops to be able to pull that off, and to be able to do it consistently, I think, is incredible. I think that's, Ice Cream Man. That was an interesting anthology of stories that were. I know there was a larger arc and a larger continuity that got established, but so much of it was just individual stories doing their own thing, and I really enjoyed that as well.
Yeah, and short little chunky 4-page stories doing their own thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it reminds me of even stuff like in 2000 AD, where you could have a larger universe and a thing, but the stories themselves could be self-contained in 6 or 8 pages. Of course, there were ones that were part 1, part 2, part 3, but there were plenty of them that were just one and done stories, and then you pick up a new adventure in the next issue. Sometimes I wonder if there shouldn't be more of that, in general, in order to have that sort of welcoming thing in comic book stores or for comics for new readers. Like, you step in there and you don't have to worry about generations of history that you have to, sort of do homework on, or find the Cliff's Notes on, or go to Wikipedia to see, when did Jonathan Franklin get so powerful? Something like that.
Well, see, that's the thing. Like, over here, like in your standard kind of like newsagent type stores and things, we didn't have American comics. Like, that wasn't a thing. You got magazines, and you got like British comics that were from DC Thompson, I think is the company, who do like the Beano, the Dandy, the Bunty, the Bruins, all that kind of stuff. Willie. And most of their stories in like what you would call comic book form were only like a page or two for like each character, in like essentially what was like newspaper comic strips. You know, it's printed on essentially slightly better than newspaper, and you had colored prints when I was young, but they were going long before that, when it was all kind of black and white, and you basically get like an issue. It would have like let's just say 10 stories in it. It might be like 20 pages long or whatever, and some of them would be 2 or 3 pages story. Some of them would literally be half a page story, and they were all sort of self-contained about different characters, and it wasn't always the same characters each kind of like, I think it was a bi-weekly thing, and you would get different characters involved. So like, say their speedster character Billy the Wiz was in this month's issue, you might not get him in next month's issue. You might get I'm trying to think now, Roger the Dodger, which is like one of the scheming type kind of characters, and like they would focus on it kind of that way, and that way for like a kid's attention span as well, when you're first getting into reading and that kind of side of things. Like, it was really easy to just like focus on a page or two, and you could reread that same story before moving on to reading anything else, or you could go straight to your favorite character if that's what you wanted to do, rather than having to learn continuity or know what jumping on point or whatever it was. And the stories, although the characters did somewhat age over time, was very much like The Simpsons, where it reset at the end of each story. So, you felt like you were getting development of the character over time, but where they were at in the world kind of stayed stationary so that they could keep telling these stories. And as I say, I never really read American stuff until I was probably well into my teens and found comic book stores, which was not a thing in small towns.
Yeah. I mean, I read a lot of American comics, but again, they were from the 70s and the 80s, and they tended to be good one-shots, and having a two-parter was a deluxe event. It's like, ooh, must be Sweeps Week or something like that, maybe. Whatever the version of that is. I see Gore Vidal wrote about the Fantagraphics republishing the Maggie and Hopi stories, which I think is great for new readers. I do think that getting them all in one volume is the way that some people will prefer to go, because it's very intimidating. Where do I start? Which is my first volume and all of that stuff. So particularly with the Love and Rockets approach, which I love, it can be confusing to people because it's an anthology approach. So you've got that facsimile sort of approach, which you had with the first 50. And this is the opposite of that. This is curating it by author and by characters. Yeah,
I mean, I guess it depends on how much you're committing yourself to the whole thing. Like if you're committing yourself to reading the whole thing, then I get that it's important to guess kind of like start at the beginning. But again, like just personally, as like a kid, if I went round to like my grandparents' house and they had a random comic issue and they were like, here, read this, I got it in the car boot sale, I'd be over the moon to read any issue from any part.
Yeah, but it surprises me how much that changes as people get older. I mean, I absolutely agree with you. That's absolutely, I think we were all that way, and we were omnivorous in that way. And I think
between
the more
comics and games, like if I got one, it could be several months until I got another thing, so I would adore it and use it.
And also the fact that it was part of the fun. I mean, I think, and I've, one of the first American superhero comics that I ever read was a random issue of Magic, and it's not one of the first, but I read like these old fashioned ones, right? I read like these Scott Swan Superman and stuff like that, like of the modern sort of things. And it was like in the middle of Ilyana being in hell, and having a soul. Like, I have no idea who these guys are. And, I had some sort of idea of the X-Men, but I'd read like the old X-Men where they all wore the same costume and they're, the first issues or something like that. I'd read that. So, but it was fascinating because I had to make it all up. I had to make up who these people were and what they were doing because I just got a random issue in the middle of it. But I do think that the older we get, I've seen this definitely. People don't want to try out stuff, and they don't even want to try out one chapter of something, which is like they want the whole thing. They want all of it. And more I encounter people who have bought this omnibus and it's still sitting on their shelves in shrink wrap years later. That buying and that collecting and that gathering and having the full story has somehow replaced the joys of reading and trying to just make up the story if you don't have the whole picture. I think it's I mean, I'm not saying I'm above it myself, but I purposely, force myself to get something because I want to try it and because it's very cheap. And I don't think about, where am I going to get the next volume from? That's for after I've read it and decided if I want one. Whereas people tend to be like, oh, I'm going to have FOMO. It might go out of print. What's the point? I won't be able to resell it if I don't have the whole thing. There are all these other considerations. And I'm like, how come reading something new isn't one of those considerations? That just feels a little bizarre to me. But
I've
get off
fallen
my
into
lawn now.
I've fallen into that trap though too at times where I'm like, well, I really want to get this volume one looks great. I can't wait to pick it up. And then, oh well, volume 2 is out of print. Well, if I can't get a hold of volume 2 and I buy volume 1 and I really like it, and then my mind just will be like, well, I'll just wait until either volume 2 comes back in, or I'm not going to get it. But I'm also the same way as you mentioned. I definitely one of those where like, I want to have all the volumes and then I'll start reading it. My intention is good. The follow through is what really caused me. And part of it's, I think, just getting older. I was talking to my nephew, who I think he was probably 15 at the time. And he said he went and saw Dune 2. And I asked him what he thought of it. And he said, I was a little confused because I didn't see the first one. And I'm like, my mind is like, well, I would never even consider that. Like, why did you go see it? He's like, I was looking for a movie to see. And it's just, I'm like, yeah, maybe I'm just getting older. Maybe that's, maybe at that age, that's what I would have done. Hey, it's what's out. I've got a chance to go see it. I'm going to go see it. And I'll worry about seeing the first one at some other point.
Yeah, and I think that makes a difference because in that example, it's kind of like someone going to watch The Empire Strikes Back and not having seen Star Wars. And The Empire Strikes Back is a great movie, but you've got to see Star Wars, otherwise it makes no sense. Yeah. Whereas, I saw Aliens before I saw Alien, and it didn't really make that much of a difference. And I know people who've seen Terminator 2, who saw Terminator 2 before they saw the first Terminator, because it was just a bigger blockbuster movie when some people were a certain age and all of that stuff. And it didn't really make that much of a difference to them either. So I really do think it does depend on the thing. And I think, I'm not saying that the American comics I read when I was a kid didn't work in a certain continuity. There would always be a little asterisk and the editor would say, as we saw in issue 87 or something like that. There'll always be some sort of a reference there, but the stories were still themselves complete. You didn't have to know every single thing. You still got a good story. You still got a beginning, middle, and end as far as a story is concerned. And I think that's the thing that I think people can find in many comics if they just gave them a shot. So, I mean, I know what you're saying, Matt, because I've felt that way myself, but I've also been like, why am I going to buy 8 volumes of something that I don't even know if it's good or not? Like, why would I automatically commit to that? So I have a lot of #1 volumes that I never bought any others after that because they didn't appeal to me that much. And I have a lot of #1 volumes because they appeal to me so much that I switched to buying the deluxe hardcovers or the library editions or something like that. So, I've got like both of those things, but I'm really glad I have those #1s because they gave me a taste of something, and then I could decide whether I wanted to read more. And I think that part of it, is what I want to hold on to. I don't want to become like a person who wants to have 9 volumes on a shelf, and that's more important than having read one of them. I know it sounds very superior, but maybe I am superior.
Well, my mind doesn't work that way. My mind's a greed mind. So, like, I wish I was at that spot.
No, I get it. I liked it when Highland G's like, I don't know if you've read Invincible, Matt, and it's like right above you, all 12 of those volumes up there. Mine are down there, but I've only gotten to 10. But you see how good I'm being? Like, I didn't get, like I've gone through them 1 volume at a time. I know that 12 has just suddenly gone up in price now, and I know that they were out of print for a while, but then they got reprinted, and I'm just like, I'm not gonna get 11 until I've finished reading 10. Even though at this point of time, I know I like the series, and I am going to, I should just go ahead and get them.
Yeah, I think they've redone the hardcovers. Like the first set were maybe like just plain black hardcovers, and then the new set have like art on them or something. I could be wrong.
No, the Ultimate Collection,
like
the same one
jacket.
Yeah, these ones all have pictures on the front.
Yeah.
Oh, under the desk. Yeah.
Yeah, under the jacket.
Yeah.
I think they changed something about it, but anyway, I can't remember.
I'll have to open the dust jacket and look inside then.
Yeah. But there's still that volume
compare.
9 that's got the purple Invincible on it.
I started to fall into I started to fall into the middle of it too, to a certain extent now. Like, what is there? 9 or 10 volumes of Asadora out right now, and I think I bought 3. And I decided I'm going to read the first 3, and then I'll decide what I'm going to do after that, which is way different than just a couple of years ago where I would have been like, I'm going to get them all, and then maybe I'll like them and not. And,
yeah. There you go. Come to the light. Come to the light, Matt.
I bought a few of something at once, but I don't think I've ever bought the whole thing at once. Like I tend to have gone one or two ways, where either it's an upgrade of something that I've started reading or read in a different format. So I'm just getting the deluxes as they come out. And sometimes that could be like 6 months to a year apart. So I'm just buying them as they come out. And there's every chance that they don't do the full set. Like that has happened. The other thing is, like, if I want a specific set or version or something, then I'll just like hunt it down and do the like whole eBay search thing, and I'll create a whole bunch of searches with various misspellings and what have you, and just save them on eBay, and periodically go in and check and see what's kind of there. And like I got a whole bunch of like what I'd consider kind of rare now versions of certain books, just because I didn't want them in other formats. Like I've got Ex Machina in the hardcovers, like the 5 different green little hardcovers rather than the big omnibus. I've got the Invisibles, Grant Morrison's, I think it's 4 hardcovers rather than the massive omnibus. And there's a few other ones, and I've had to just buy them in whatever order I can find them in, and it could be like it takes me 2 years to get the set, and I've only got volumes 2, 3, and 5 or something. But it is what it is. And if it does go so long, then I have also been known to just say I end up with volumes 2 through 5. I have on occasion just read it, because why not? And I've had a few experiences with writers that kind of write that way anyway. I think it's Cy Spurrier, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he's done a lot of stories where his idea of kind of world building is that he just immerses you in the world, rather than telling you this is how this works and this is what the world type is and this is what's going on. Like, you're just like, here's the character, they're doing stuff, and the world's kind of around you. Kind of like, imagine you threw a reporter into a war zone. Like, they wouldn't know all the tactics and everything that's going on. They're just going to figure it out on their feet. And that's kind of like where your story starts with a lot of his kind of books. So there's been like independent books where it's literally like 4 or 5 issues, and he's just like throwing you in at the start of a mission of something, and then you get the end of the mission and you get the full story, but you never truly learn the whole world. You just experience it. And I think it's an interesting way to look at things and be like, well, you don't need to know everything. Like in the real world, nobody knows everything about what's going on in the rest of the world. You just have to take the nuggets that you know and make the best decisions you can with that,
Yeah, I think that's very poetic. It's a good metaphor.
Well, for the love of comics, did you have another one to show off? I know we're getting up towards.
I know I'm gonna fall asleep on you guys, but I apologize. That's not for the lack of stimulating conversation. But yes, it's just been a very busy month so far because of various things. So I'm sort of half asleep. But I did want to talk a little bit about the latest volume that I've grabbed of Bride Story by Kaoru Mori, which is a comic manga series that I have absolutely adored for years. And they come out in these quite wonderful dust-jacketed hardcovers from Yen Press. And Kaoru Mori is someone whose artwork I was attracted to by seeing samples of it online. Bride Story looked absolutely gorgeous in its line work and depiction. And it is something that I picked up and was instantly hooked to, not just because of the artwork, but because of its depiction of these nomadic tribes along, Central Asian tribes along the Silk Route. And, with the Mongols coming on one side, and it's this horse riding nomadic culture. And the first volume, which I guess must have been over a decade ago that I picked up, had a weird child marriage in it. But it was a child marriage, like there were 2 children getting married to each other. And it was the girl who was the older of the 2, not the male, which I get, just cultural expectations. I thought it would be the boy who was older. But the girl was about 15 and the boy was about 11 or 12. but and it was almost like she was too old to be married, and her family was thinking that, oh, her time has passed, and who's going to want to marry her now that she's 15. And it was just kind of weird, but it wasn't at all creepy. There was something just so elegantly done as far as its subcultural depiction is concerned, and so I mean, I guess it could feel a little problematic in some ways, but it's set a long time ago. It's about a particular culture, and it's, from everything I can imagine, it's kind of authentic to that. But it was also an excellent adventure story about a number of characters. And over the years, volumes 1 to, this is volume 14 that I've just gotten. Over the years, there've just been more and more characters introduced, and their stories and their lives being depicted. And it's had incredible, incredible artwork, of course, as I was showing you. I mean, like any page you can just sort of open to and see what the line work is, but it's more than that. What the way that this world has been conjured up, and the way that these lives have been portrayed, the details that this art includes, is it isn't just decoration. It tells you, like, this is what they do with their clothes, this is how they make their jewelry, this is how they make their saddles. All of these things it's a sort of cultural insight, and it's one of the finest examples I've seen of gorgeous art doing anthropology, and doing anthropology in an incredibly page turning sort of way, because, as I said, it's action. Yeah, there is like, and this is a particularly action heavy volume. There are some that are very quiet and gentle and meditative, some that are quite philosophical, many about the beauties of nature. This one has a lot of horse mounted combat and a lot of cool badassery. The depiction of women, and here we have a return of some of these characters, including characters from the very first couple of volumes. After that, we'd left them behind. But just look at this. Look at this artwork. I mean, it's not just artwork. It's like you feel you're there. You feel like you've been transported back in time, and you've been transported to these locations. And it can also be quite funny, not like a sitcom, haha funny, but the way that Kaoru Mori sees these characters and the way she depicts these characters has such truth to them. And of course, it is, there's a little bit of nudity, there's a little bit of sexual embarrassment, between married couples and people from different tribes who don't know each other and who have been married, to make alliances happen. But there's also romance, there's also love. So it feels very old and very contemporary at the same time. And I've been very excited to every single time I've gotten a new volume of this. And this is one of those that I highly recommend to people. It's one of those things that, yes, there are 15 volumes out there now, I think the 15th volume is also out. I've got to get my hands on that, but I wouldn't get it until I finished 14. But,
so I gotta get all 15 right away.
yeah, and so make shelf space, Matthew, for this. But I think every one of the volumes is still available. I think Yen Press keeps them in print. They're not out of print. They're not exorbitantly priced, and I think they're they are solid hardcovers, very well produced, gorgeously designed, with a very classic sort of feel to them. Very simple and unadorned in some ways, but just rock solid in every other way. I would, I think this is one of the best kept secrets in comics. I think people talk a lot about long running manga of different kinds. Bride Story doesn't get called out as often, and the incredible consistency that Kaoru Mori has shown over the years in bringing this out and really taking this to level after level and keeping you engaged with this world and keeping you engaged with these characters is it's kind of low key, but it's also breathtaking. So I this is a recent read, but more than that, it's just like I want another opportunity to sort of preach about the beauty of this comic. In fact, in the 31 Days of Comics thing that I sometimes play on my channel, in my day selection for a gorgeous comic, this is the one I picked because that was a really odd question, like a gorgeous comic. Like every comic that I read in some way or the other is a gorgeous comic, But if I think about pure gorgeousness, there is a visual gorgeousness to it, but also the fact that it's not decorative. It's not merely decorative. It's not just to say, oh, look at my penmanship, but it has this incredible storytelling power that every gorgeous detail that it puts in there is to make you feel these living, breathing cultures, in these kind of adventure stories, in these kind of romance stories, in these kind of slice of life stories, is an incredible accomplishment. So that's the one book that I have been able to get to, and now onward to volume 15 for me. But yes, I really do recommend this. I think this is the kind of comic that almost anyone can enjoy if they just have the patience for it, because it's not just all slow talk, there's hunting and there's fighting and there's all that stuff, but there's also, where are we going and what's the world, how the world is changing around us and how we keep holding on to our cultures and meeting different people from different cultures. There's an entire volume about a German photographer who starts traveling with one of these tribes for a while and, told from his point of view. And then you meet other characters and there are other volumes that are about them. And then they loop back around and then you'll find yourself revisiting characters. It's extremely gratifying.
That's cool. I wasn't familiar with this one. I've never heard of that one, so I missed that part of the 31-day challenge. But I got my, probably can't see them, but there's my Plutos are right here. Which
did you get all 8 at once?
Oh yeah, I've already read through the whole series, and then I went back and bought the original volume 3 of Astro Boy, which the World's Greatest Robot is based. This is based off of that, right? So I got through the whole thing, and then originally went and found the paperback of that one volume I wanted to see how it is. So, yeah, your recommendation has been spot on. So I'm gonna be digging for this one. This one looks good, but I will just buy maybe 2 volumes of it to start with.
Oh, wow, that's incredible self-control.
Yes, because with Pluto, I bought all 8 of them right away.
Yeah,
I just was like, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to go all in and buy all 8 and go for it. So
no, having said that, I was getting Taiyo Matsumoto's Tokyo These Days, and I've read Sunny, which I think is fantastic. I really like Ping Pong. I've liked everything. I mean, what's the Louvre book that he did? Cats of the Louvre. Like everything that Matsumoto has done that I've read, I've been impressed with. Some of them I've absolutely loved, and some of them, like number 5 is like, okay, it's not like absolute love, but it's still very accomplished, and I'm still very happy with it. So I got volume 1, and there are 3 volumes of Tokyo These Days, and I got volume 1, and I was like, should I just get volume 2 and 3? These are beautiful looking hardcovers. Look, they're so gorgeous. I'm like, no, you got to get volume 1 and then do Discipline. And then I read volume 1. I'm like, this is fantastic. Why didn't I get volume 2 and 3 at the same time? What was I thinking? So that I do go through those things also. So now I have ordered volume 2 and volume 3 together. But I'm just like, all right, you know what? You can go overboard a little bit with your conservatism, Anshuman. Why don't you just it's 3 volumes. It's by someone you really like. You can go ahead and get those 3 volumes. So yeah, I'm just teasing you. But I really think that if you give A Bright Story a shot, 2 volumes is good enough for you to know whether it's something you'd want to read or not. It doesn't really falter in its quality. If anything, some of the later stories are more complex. The artwork in some ways but it hits the ground running, in my opinion. It doesn't, there are some series that take a little while to warm up, and the first volume isn't necessarily what you would ask people to read. I mean, that's true with Maggie the Mechanic. It's true with Fables. It's true with Usagi Yojimbo, even, my favorite comic of all time. But not this one. In this one, you can pick up volume 1 and you'll be in good hands from the very beginning.
Okay. And the other one you said was called Tokyo Today?
Tokyo These Days.
Tokyo These Days. That one I'm not familiar with either.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to dig through some of these. You just
Taiyo
cost me some money, buddy.
No. These are books that more than will pay for themselves over the years. It's like not one-time reads. These are things that you could revisit over and over again. And even if you pick them up from the middle, you'd be able to slip right back into those worlds and, wallow in it for a while, which is what I absolutely love.
There's
doing.
something. No, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say there's something when you start showing some of the artwork and it resonates. And I know over the years, I've come to trust your judgment when you get this excited about something in a good way, that it's like, this is going to resonate with me. I can just, it's like, I need to search some of these out. So thank you for that.
No. And, like we were talking about, all of us in the Strangers in Paradise live stream, as well as, things that I've said about Love and Rockets and things like that. It's like, I love it. I can see not everyone loving it, or I can see it being a thing. And then there are other things where I'm like, man, I can see most people loving this if they give it a shot, or if they had the patience for it or something like that. There's always that distinction in our heads. It's like, I love this as a Green Lantern fan all my life, but, it may not appeal to other people. Or I love this Serenity comic because I used to love Firefly, or I love this translation of Critical Role because I really like Critical Role in a live stream. But that doesn't mean everyone will. But then there are certain books, that I just think have an incredible appeal, and that's what I think about, like say Usagi Yojimbo or Gru the Wanderer, and I think Sunny by Taiyo Matsumoto is really a lovely comic. If you haven't read Sunny, I would highly recommend Sunny. So after that, I would seek out anything Matsumoto does. And then there are things that have, as I said, have been really, really good. And other things I'm just like, hey, I'm a fan, so I'm going to read it. And it's kind of like Jason, where I like it, but I wouldn't say this should be the first Jason you should read. Go read that one. There'll always be that kind of distinction in our minds. And I think we all will have those kind of books. But A Bride Story is definitely one, unless you must have aliens and lasers, I think you can really get into this story. I mean, it's just like one of those things where it's gentle and cool at the same time, in a very gorgeous presentation. But that's those are the only recent reads I have so far. Although next week we'll be talking about a few 600, 700 pages more or something.
Lots of changes going on in Strangers, right?
Yeah, but that's a story for another day.
Yeah. Well, should we wrap up so we can get some tuckered out guy to bed, and the rest of us can get on with our day?
Like, I'm not the one holding people up for a change.
Oh, man. Sorry, I'm getting up at 5 o'clock these days for early shifts. So to me, this is still pretty evening.
Wow. Well, I'm looking forward to a nice and meaty live stream when we talk about Strangers in Paradise with all our friends. One, because we've got that chunk of pages to talk about, and then because there'll be double the number of people that we have here today. So we can camel store up our energy for that one now.
Yeah.
I might try and put some bullet points or something together for it as well, because the last chat was fun, but I think we went off in random kind of tangents about
what?
the writer's
Us?
career
No,
and things
never.
like that, rather
never. We've never done anything like that.
I would have
our mission.
personally
That's
to have had a few more opinions on story beats. That's just my thoughts.
All right, we've been tasked for the love of comics to try to get it off track as much as possible, is what Highland is telling us. That he's going to try to control things, and you and I are the chaos agents. So we see what we can do.
No. I mean, we have a recording. We can always go back to the evidence and say, all right, these are the things that we need to get rid of, and this is the fat that we need to trim. But yes, I look forward to that conversation next week, gentlemen.
Yeah, I do too.
Sounds
Yeah.
good.
But
Sounds
thanks
good.
for getting us together, Highland G. Appreciate it.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for coming on.
All right. Take care.
And thank you everyone for watching and
Yeah.
for
See you next week,
Gore's
Gore.
100 comments.